All right. We are live.
Okay, let me just get this up.
There we are.
Great. Can you send that on over here, Steph?
Send one over.
The whole live feed because YouTube hasn't recognized it yet.
You'll see it in a minute. Now I gotta find interview questions. Okay.
Are you going to be the official asker tonight, Steph?
Oh, it doesn't matter.
Oh, I was going to say I'm happy to read the chat.
Because well, I just was gonna have them up, but I told you I was gonna ask Dawn, like, just tell me everything.
There's so much to tell.
There is. I feel like this could just be a regular. There we go. Now we're I feel. Ooh. Okay. Okay, that is not what I asked for. Thank you. That was weird. I had it up and then I put on a movie. Ooh, it looks really nice with 3 people.
Yeah, it stacks us so that yeah.
Dawn, it's odd not to see you in a blue shirt.
I know. Blue didn't work with Mary.
Really? I would think it would stand out better. No?
I didn't want to stand out. I wanted to blend in.
I mean, I understand. Okay, this looks good over here. Okay. I've got like 700 things going on my computer.
Oh, I know, me too.
Okay. Well, so here we are. We've made it. We've made it to the end of our phenomenal book and our reading. I was very sad to be done. I thoroughly enjoyed looking at all the tools, and believe me, I went to a show today. I noticed things that I haven't noticed before. I've never looked at reticules. You bet I did today. So it's definitely another one of those, the more you know. And then we come over here, the more you spend.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So finally we get to do our phenomenal interview with you, Dawn, and we have to start it with thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for doing this with us and the giveaways that you gave us. We can't thank you enough. It's been so amazing. I don't know how we're ever going to be this good ever again.
Yes, you raised the bar.
Thank you.
I hope it's been as good for you as it has been for us, because it's been amazing for us. Hi, Tish. And I want to talk about absolutely everything.
Uh-oh.
Are you ready for juicy questions? Hi, Robin. So
hey.
Should we just fire away?
Yeah, let's fire away, because I mean, you know how you and I can talk forever. So
yeah, we could be here for 3 hours.
Yeah. So let's respect Dawn's time and go ahead and get to it. So do you want me to fire away with the first question?
Go for it.
So we want to know, some of us here may have been inspired by you. So we were wondering about your story. How did you become a historian? And, how did you start collecting?
I think I was born with the urge to collect. As a kid, I was the kind of kid that had a shoebox of, treasures under the bed that was probably like limestone gravel that sparkled in the driveway, and just then the curiosity of what I had, like someone would say, oh, well, that's just stupid gravel. Then you want to know what limestone is and why does it sparkle? So this kind of held true with the needlework tools when I was collecting them, wanting to know what I had in my collection. And being a better consumer too, I think.
Okay.
Were you using what you were collecting at the time?
Somewhat, yes. And there's a few things I have that I said I was going to use, and people quickly told me not to use them. Um, Although I still think that a lot of them, because just the nature of the quality that they're made with, you can certainly still use them.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. Yeah, I don't know about you, Jill, but I too was the child with the box full of things.
Totally.
And I still have some of those little boxes, and I'm like, I was a good little collector. But why needlework tools versus, say, coins, stamps, beanie babies,
Oh,
I mean, all the other things.
yeah, it's textiles. I've always been fascinated with textiles. I've embroidered since I can have any memories. Just the color, the nature of the tactile nature of various threads and ground fabrics, and I was kind of the dorky kid, and I would spend my babysitting money on embroidery. I wasn't going to the movies; I was buying embroidery kits. So,
Do you find that you're ever thinking about who owned these items before you? I get lost in that a lot.
oh, definitely. Certainly with anything that has a name on it or a date, like a sampler or a quilt or the sewing rolls where someone took the time to write on it. Yeah, well, some of the sewing boxes too. Um, if it was given by grandma in 1898, you just kind of wonder what the dynamic was and why does it look unused? Did she hate sewing and grandma tried to force her to sew? Or did every grandma get one?
Robin said, my 5-year-old granddaughter currently has every rock, stone, precious gem, piece of gravel she's ever collected spread out on her table.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Hi, Janet.
It's the
coming in.
It's the gateway, right? The rocks, the driveway rocks are the gateway for collectors.
I mean, luckily I didn't, I used to put worms in the pockets of my dress. So luckily I didn't still keep doing that and went on to something far prettier and less gross.
Less biological.
For sure. For sure. I'm
Oh,
sure my
wow.
mother is far more pleased with what I collect now.
I'd rather go dancing than practice the piano.
Mm-hmm.
So, Jill, next.
Oh, are we trading off now?
I thought we would trade off.
So,
This Mickey Mouse show. Good grief.
so Dawn, what kind of advice would you give to someone who's just starting out collecting?
That's interesting that you asked that because I just heard somebody else answer that, and their advice I actually disagreed with. So they told people to only buy the best and only buy that wasn't pristine. And I kind of disagree with that because I think things can have historical significance and not be perfect. I think you can like things that are worn. Sometimes you like those better just because they look like somebody's hands have used them. So I would say first to buy what you love, and then things kind of evolve as you build your collection. You can always trade or get another version of something. You're not roped into just that, but I would say buy what you love.
Or even, we even have our friend Anne there who buys, and then when she's ready for new things, sells and buys new things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your tastes change or you want to change the direction of your collection, go for it.
I remember when I was first starting out and you had asked me, what are you going to focus on? And I remember being there going, oh no, I can't. I just love everything and then we're looking at collections where this person focuses on chatelaines and this one focuses on tape measures, and I'm like, I think I just need to have all of those things. I can't focus on any one thing. Mine's gonna have to be encyclopedic instead of focus based. And it's, oh my goodness, when I think about some of just the random stuff where I'm just like, that needle case is coming home with me today. Do I have a needle case? No, that's coming home. This is going to start the obsession with needle cases for the next 3 months. And then we move on to Bakelite, something else.
Yeah, it's hard. I feel like it's hard to be the kind of collector who's like, I only collect this very narrow window of things, especially needlework tools, because like that's the category, but there's so many lanes you could be in. Um, and I was thinking, Dawn, as you were talking about, sometimes the old worn things are actually even better. I feel like those are the ones with the stories, the ones that have marks or somebody's name. It's nice to have something that's like never been used, brand new old stock. But I feel like the stories don't have, like, they don't come with those things as much as the worn stuff.
Yeah, I think that's kind of how I got into more American folk art too, was that at any given day, you can go out and buy a 18 karat gold ivory sewing kit. You can find them. They're all over the place. But can you find a one of a kind handmade thread box that's a man made for his sweetheart? Things like that are harder to find, and they're just a whole different genre and a whole different story.
Love it.
And a one of a kind story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Janet says that I'm a generalist. And
I
Robin
like that
says,
title.
yeah, and then Robin says if it calls to you, you must take it. Dawn, I feel like that needs to be our motto. Don't you
Well,
think we should like put that on a pillow?
I think you have to add just one more line to that, Robin, and or it will haunt you forever.
Oh,
Yes. The
oh,
one that got away.
Yeah, yeah.
that is a thing. Hi Leslie. So Leslie's asked, what's your advice for finding needlework tools? Best places to look, places to avoid, unusual or unexpected places that might be good for locating items.
I like the hunting process. So, like I said, on any given day, there's dealers, and you can go to their website or their online shop and pick something out. That's easy, and that's something you could tell your family, go here and buy me something from the shop. But I like the hunting process. So I like going out to an estate sale and looking for things. I like antique malls. Um, every place is fair game. You never know where they're going to show up. Some places don't even think they're important enough to list. And I've gone to estate sales, maybe for a quilt or something wooden. And then I find out they've got a whole pile of sewing stuff stuffed under the table because they didn't think it was important enough. Who would want that? That's where you find the $500 embroidery hoop because they thought it was a 50-cent wooden thing with some funky dial on it. So yeah, everything's an opportunity.
And I that would probably be a good point to mention the mixed lots.
Yeah,
Where
yes, excellent point. Yeah.
so you find the gold in there.
Box of stuff, it's got 50 things in the lot, and even an auctioneer, sometimes they're too busy to lay them all out. And if the price is right, it's super fun. And sometimes, you enlarge it on your computer and you zoom in and you think you see what you think you see. And you're really lucky when you get it. And that's what it is. I've gotten things that way. Yeah.
Hi, Arlene. Leslie said her dream is to find the queen hoop.
There,
Leslie,
so in January, I was in Mesa, Arizona, and we at this symposium, and we're at this little table, and this woman came back, and she was staying at her sister's house down at the Hilton with us, and she said, "I'm late because I stopped at a garage sale, and I just had this feeling come over me." So, and she said, "I don't even really go to garage sales," and she had gone in, went in the garage, and what did she buy? A queen hoop for $1.
oh my goodness.
Like, don't tell anybody. I'll like get mugged.
And it was in like good condition, I'm assuming.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It
Wow.
was perfect. Yeah.
Wow. I don't
Oh,
have any stories like that. Mine
oh,
was
not true. Not true. You walked into a thrift store and bought the dating fabrics, the second edition of dating fabrics for $3.
oh,
So yeah, you do have a story like that.
I mean, it's not exactly the same. I did find the nut for a good price, but it was not $1.
Yeah.
It's so funny because there might be a husband of mine in the chat who just brought up the one that got away, like the stamp that you told me to buy that I didn't buy at a show once, and someone snatched it out from under me for a real steal. He still talks about that.
He doesn't let you forget about it.
Oh, and we're never gonna forget about it, because I'm gonna tell you right now, I left that show like a hurt bumpkin. But now when we're out somewhere and I'm thinking, after I look at everything and I'm thinking like, what am I gonna? He was always like, is it gonna be like the stamp? It was a cool stamp. He's like, it's just gonna be like the stamp. You should probably get it if it's gonna be like the stamp. And that's kind of the metric that we use to decide. Although now that I have other stamps, I'm not as upset, but
Well, in terms of the one that got away, does Dawn have a unicorn? Is there one that got away?
Oh yeah, there's probably several. Probably Jill's nut is on my programs I always put a slide that's like my unicorn item. And so Jill's nut is always in most of my needlework tool programs. Not that it got away, because was her find, but I can still envy it. Yeah, I've been pretty lucky, because things that got away, I've collected enough years, I can usually come up with something, like them. So yeah, I guess nothing's really at the tip of my mind.
oh, but that's good. That means that you're not upset about anything today.
Well, I've been doing this long enough, I get over it, because there's always the next time. I always know there's always something. There's always something. Yeah. I spent an hour this morning looking at auction sites, and it's like, just stop it. Why do you do that? Register. Yeah.
Yeah.
We have to fill the time with something.
It's a dangerous rabbit hole sometimes, but it is delightful.
Yeah.
So back to the book, I think Jill and I have declared it our Bible for American Needlework Tools. What led you to write it in the first place?
A few things. I was collecting for many years prior to that, and as I said, I was accumulating information, on what I had, backgrounds on it, and then I would go places and I'd see dealers or auctions with wrong information or misinformation, and you try and tell people like, that's probably not right, and I kind of thought I could do a book. And then I talked to a few friends and they convinced me to at least submit a proposal. And I did. And, in the back of your mind, you're like, who wants a book on needlework tools? There's already some out there. And part of the submission process is, why is your book needed in the marketplace? Things that really force you to think through that. So yeah, things like that disciplines you to kind of think through who your market would be, who wants this book, what's your competition. And some of that can be kind of daunting. So you have days where you think, oh, this is stupid. Why am I doing this? And then other days you're like pretty up on the whole process. So yeah, it's a process.
I feel like a lot of the other books, at least that I've seen, are somewhat out of date.
Yeah,
about
that's what I was
certain
going to
things at this
say.
point. They were. I feel like they're all from the 80s or maybe older. Are there others around, other books that have been published somewhat recently?
Most authors would probably tell you the minute you push send, you're like, damn, I wish I would have done this part a little different or whatever. There's always new information. There's always, oh, I could have taken that picture better. There's always ways you can kind of second guess yourself. But what I found as a collector was, there wasn't a lot about American tools. Like I said, there's beautiful books, entire books on sterling silver and gold chatelaines. Everyone writes about the beautiful jewelry, museum kind of collectibles, but nobody was really writing about the American pieces. And kind of their story, especially some of the regional and one of a kind things.
Definitely the one of a kind things. There, I believe you said there was another piece in here that was folky that was on your list of I would die to have that. It was a friend of yours that had it.
Oh yeah, the ivory. It's got the ivory clamps and then the pin cushion.
Yeah.
And all of those are one of a kind, and they're all handmade, and you'll never find any like them. Yeah. So yeah, that's a good point.
That must, man, that must be that must be a lot rougher than my nut, because at least there are other nuts out there. I have yet to see any nice ones, but they do exist, don't they, somewhere?
And I have really special memories about all of those, spending time in Kathy's home, spending time in Texas home. Jill brought the nut. I got to hold the nut. So I mean, we have really special memories on all those things, even if I don't own them. So yeah.
And just for anybody watching who doesn't know what we're talking about when we say the nut, it is this beautiful sewing box with like pristine all the tools in it, right? But
Yeah.
it's a walnut. It's like a silver and velvety walnut thing.
You
it's
you can find them, but Jill's is extra special because it's real silver. Most of them are brass. She has all the original tools, which is also rare. The lining is all intact. So it ticks all the boxes as far as if you were that collector that only bought things in perfect condition, or that has precious metals, and that it ticks all the boxes.
I mean, sadly, at that point in time, I wasn't in any of those categories to check all those boxes. It was literally, actually, it was the show that happens the day before the show I went to today. This vendor who doesn't even vend that stuff, they vend jewelry, must have gotten it in a mixed lot and posted it to their Instagram that they were bringing it to the show. And I was like, I'm just sitting here going like, wow, it's really pretty. And I sent it to Dawn, and she was basically like, you go get that right now. Like, you get that right now. How much do they want for that? You ask them right now. And I'm like, I'm literally there, like messaging the dealer, like they're not answering me. I'm very stressed out. I'm even like, I'll pay you for it right now and I'll pick it up tomorrow. Cause let me just tell you, like the price was just right. Because at the bare minimum, I knew it was going to be a scenario where if I got there and decided I didn't want it, she sure did. And this whole I let her hold it. I feel like I have to briefly tell you about that. When we went to the Penn Dry Goods show a couple of years ago, it was the first time Dawn and I were meeting in person. We'd already talked for a few years at that point. And here I am thinking like I should bring this, because she's like, people bring show and tell. I'm like, I should bring this for show and tell. And I'm thinking like, she's seen photos. She probably wants to see it in person for scale and size and stuff. And I handed, she's like, you're gonna let me hold it? And I'm like, yeah, you can take the stuff out. Like you can look at it. But now it's just that she let me hold it. And then you told Mike that you hold the nut, and I'm telling you, it has a throne. We worship it on Sundays.
If you can't have fun with it, why not?
It is definitely the pride joy, but I'm not even kidding. Like it is willed to her if something happens to me. I mean, this is what friends are for.
Indeed. Who else are you leave your treasures to?
Yeah, Steph, you're gonna have to pick something else out of my collection. Although Dawn hasn't seen everything in my collection. There might be something she fights you over, but I doubt it. It's just the nut. Do you have something like that in your collection, Steph, that you are just like, this is my pride and joy?
I mean, I have a nut as well, but my nut is literally like a chatelaine nut that hangs, but it does open up. It has a little vial that would have held perfume and a little mirror and little pins. But yes, it is nowhere near as fantastic as yours.
I mean, there isn't this rule that like we have to be just obsessed with nuts. Like you can be obsessed with anything you want to be.
From the perspective of like, I looked at this thing and went, I'm gonna spend money on this item.
Mhm.
you know, and it is sterling silver, and it, you know, that, yeah. And probably my needle cases that I've started investing in, and thus far I have not spent a lot of money, but you know, the bean, the
Oh
little
yeah.
the pea pod, and the little uh
The
umbrella.
umbrella.
That,
Yeah.
yeah, those you know, they're, I guess they're my entry. There's lots of those kind of really fancy little needle holders that are, you know, little needle cases that are just amazing. So
Mhm.
one day, there's one I'm looking at on eBay that they've offered it to me a dozen times at like $1,500. And I'm like, not yet, not yet.
You're like, can you come down like a whole nother half than that?
Yeah.
Like, then we'll talk. Then we'll talk. Um, so Dawn, back to the book. What advice would you have for other people that might be like, I'm gonna write a book about sewing tools and sewing history? You know, I'm sure you've got good things to tell them.
Yeah. I think the misconception is people think that you make money writing books, and I think right now, um, you have to do it as a labor of love, because you won't make any money doing the books. It's just the nature of the market. It's not like a, you know, Stephen King bestseller fiction kind of situation. When you're doing nonfiction on an obtuse topic, you have to do it out of passion and just kind of wanting to do it. Um, you have to do it on a relatively short timeline, I think, because technology changes so fast that if you take too long, then when you get to the end, then all of a sudden the photo requirements change or formatting changes. Um, I think you need to surround yourself. I was going to say surround yourself with really positive people, but you need people that will be honest. Like if you have readers or people that are looking at it, you don't want people to just rubber stamp and say, oh, yeah, it's fine. You want people to give really honest feedback, and whether you choose to listen to that or not is totally, you know, up to you. But you need people to be, you know, forthright and give their opinions, and good, and a diverse group of opinions are good. um yeah, I could probably talk an hour just on that, but yeah.
So
I've
based
heard
on the
people say, well, I've heard people say that, I mean, many times I've heard from authors like, don't write a book just because you want to make money, because you know, it isn't going to happen. It's just not the way the world works anymore. But from what I can tell, it's sort of the writing of books then leads to other opportunities. And I feel like that's really where, and maybe those opportunities are not huge money makers either, but you kind of have all these irons in the fire, and you're getting some notoriety from writing the book, right? Is that, would you say that's true?
Ironically, the whole Zoom phenomenon helped me immensely, because needlework tools do not lend themselves to a guild, because you can't, if you're talking about opportunities like guild programs and speaking, educational things, um, expensive smalls don't lend themselves to being passed around a room. So prior to the Zoom phenomenon, that was pretty much your only option, was going to a group, sharing your items, you know, on a PowerPoint maybe, but if you're in a room with 50 or 100 people, they can't see your needle case in the back of the room. And do you really want to pass your ivory pea pod around to 100 people? And, you know,
Yeah.
all with good intentions, but, you know, things happen. So in that regard, Zoom was really good for me, because on a screen, I talk with my hands. On a screen, PowerPoint can take that and magnify it on your monitor in a way that you wouldn't get that same experience with a guild.
Just
So
like holding it up.
yeah, yeah. So that really helped me a lot, because I could do really small, minute topics like pinballs, and you know, it's 1.5 inches in diameter, but I could do a high-res photo and you could have it on your monitor, and now you're seeing every single stitch. You can really see the detail that you wouldn't see at a normal meeting. So in that regard, I think I maybe wouldn't have done as well if I had to rely on um, just guild things. Plus, I think right now a lot of guilds are hurting financially and they can't bring people in like they used to. So you'd have to live in an area that appreciates history, and not all parts of the country are really into women's history or needlework tools. So I can get into the minutia of last week, where was a Tudor Rose Sampler Guild on a Zoom, and we had people, I think, from 2 or 3 countries and then all across the country, where if it was an in-person meeting, you know, you'd maybe get some local members.
Yeah.
I will be passing along your name, by the way, if to a particular guild in my area that if they haven't contacted you, I don't know what's wrong with them.
Are you gonna have them watch this now? Is like a C? You can bring this work. Come on. If you could go back, what would you change about your book now if you had the option? You mentioned there's always something.
Oh yeah, I mean I sat through an entire study center of someone who was an author, and she went through one of her books and spent over an hour page by page saying either, you know, what she would have done differently, what she'd learned since, you know, what new information has come to light. So you know, there's that. And once it's out there, you know, and I own that. I might have changed the scope. When it depends on your publisher, but when you do your manuscript, you have some feedback on like, this photo I would like to be a full page, and this one is okay, you know, a third of a page or whatever. You have kind of your vision in your head. And I wanted more larger photos in the first book, and so I had to, in the end, I had to make a choice between a broader scope and in smaller photos. And so that is how the third book came to be, in that I could do full page photos. So it's a trade-off. And when you're doing your first book, I think in the back of my mind, I thought this could be my only opportunity, and I'm going to include it. Where I could have been more optimistic maybe and seen it as potentially like a, I don't know, 3-volume set or something. But that would have been, that was beyond my dreams at that time, which in hindsight I probably could have.
Yes, and it's not too late. You can still make it that. I would like it that.
No complaints here. Just keep publishing. We love your books.
Yeah, we'll have the Dawn trilogy.
Well, it's expensive. So for example, if you go and find something on Pinterest and you just pin it to your board or whatever, you know, you pretty much, that's a whole free thing. But when you're going to publish and you borrow from a collection, be it a museum or private collection, usually you pay. And some of the museums are quite steep.
Yeah, they are.
And their contracts all vary. Each one is unique to work with, and each one is a time suck too, because they're all different. So there's that too. And that's probably not going to change. So
Are there that, I mean, I do remember you mentioning I do remember mentions of museums in here. Are there that many museums in the book that you worked with?
There weren't. I had some on my list that I wanted to, and we couldn't come to terms.
So I guess that kind of lends itself to another question here, which is,
I need to reword that. So we could have come to an agreement, but they weren't terms that I was comfortable with.
Fair enough.
I totally concur and understand, because my research, I just wanted a couple pictures and was like $30 a piece. Huh.
I'm talking thousands, like,
yeah. Well, exactly. I mean, the thing is, like, what I wanted, I'm like, well, I guess I could afford that, but that was just for this one application. And I know when it's a book, it's a different story because it's a wider distribution. Yeah.
And sometimes there's terms like, if you go to a reprint, you have to pay us again. Yeah.
Yeah,
and you feel bad being mad about it because it's a museum, you know?
And then it's super frustrating because people will say like, oh, well, I have that on my pin board. Okay, well, good for you.
It's not the same thing. So about for the people you borrowed from their collection, friends and things, how did you go about finding all that stuff?
Well, they're my friends, so they were egging me on.
They were just like, I have this, I have this, I have this.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
well, yeah. Yeah, especially people with an opportunity to show folk art, because some people think it's weird. Like if you said, "Oh, I have a pincushion that sits on legs and it's a horseshoe with a heart," people would be like, "Oh yeah." But until you see it, you know, for me, it was, pretty.
No, I mean, I can see where some people think it's like quote weird, but it's weird in a good way. It's not it's not weird in like a grotesque way. It's weird in an inventive way.
Depending on your taste. And I know it's a book that's not for everybody, and it doesn't try to be. Um, and it is what it is. We're a small little niche interest, um, and that's okay.
Yeah. I mean, this is where the cool kids are.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, I
So,
was going to ask you, I was just going to ask a follow-up to that in terms of, I know when you start writing a book, you kind of have to keep it close to the vest, but I'm assuming if your friends start to know or colleagues start to know you're looking for something, don't they come out in droves to be like, look what I have? Or did you maybe not experience that because of your process?
Well, part of the contract is a confidentiality agreement, both about the book and also about their process. So there's that. So a lot of times you just describe it as a project I'm working on, and then people don't know if it's a book or a magazine. And then sometimes you have to get very specific, because some institutions don't want their name associated with something that they don't think is up to their standard, um, or they perhaps have an issue with a certain publisher. I didn't run into that very much. Um, some were more cooperative than others. But I would say I'm thinking of one in particular where I had to work with quite a few volunteers, and I was concerned about confidentiality, and they were excellent. They were very professional, and I didn't have a problem.
Oh,
mhm.
nice. Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
I guess I didn't even think about, I mean, you're working with a lot of different third party. It's your book, but so many other hands are in it and you have to manage all that, right? You've got the publisher, you've got the museums, and I didn't even think about the fact that maybe they have worked with those publishers with other authors and been like, so that, yeah, I didn't even think about that. The drama.
So I'm curious, the items that are in here that are friends and colleagues and things, when you would agree, like, yeah, I have space for that, I want to showcase that, would they then send you their item to photograph, or would they photograph it for you? And then like how, or did you use it as an excuse to visit all your friends, or
I had one or two people that I wanted to include their things, and they were not comfortable sending them to me, but I didn't describe my whole project, because again, it was weighing the pros and cons of including their thing versus the confidentiality agreement. Because if it gets out, it becomes a problem, you can lose your contract. And so when you're that far down the line, like, you don't want to risk a problem. Um, and so that, I still think back on that and I wish I could have included their things. The other thing are the photo requirements. And without getting into too much detail, most people in their homes aren't able to photograph at that level. And so even though they would have been willing to, um, it wouldn't have worked. And then there's the fact that some people have such huge collections that I didn't want everything in their collection. I needed to pick and choose, and I tried to complement gaps in my collection with other people's collections. And so it was better that I just went to them. And they were all really gracious and wonderful hostesses. And we had some really good times doing that. And all of them were just like, open the door, open the cupboards, and just like, I'm going to go run an errand, go wild, you know.
Oh my goodness. That sounds like the
what
best day ever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
For
Well,
sure.
sometimes it was more than a day. But yeah, really fun times. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
let me
think
know if you want to do that again.
yeah, it's like pawing through anybody's collection is fun, right? Um, one thing that I think we didn't have on our list, but I'm wondering is like from I guess the time that you maybe got the thumbs up on your proposal to publication, like how long was that?
Years.
Okay.
Yeah. So what happened was I had a particular publisher in mind just because I bought a lot of their books. I liked for the most part, what they did. So I submitted to them and them alone. And I didn't hear anything. And so I was just like, okay, well, it wasn't meant to be, and kind of toyed around with self-publishing or, doing something else, maybe some magazine articles or something. And then a friend said, you get on the phone and you call them and you ask, I mean, just what you need, the perfect friend, and just ask, what are they going to do? Not take your call, and then you tried. And if you don't try, it'll always haunt you. So yeah, those are the kind of friends you need. So I did, I called, and they took my call and I talked to the editors. And then they scheduled a meeting, a phone meeting, and we talked again. And then I actually had the owner of the company call me and talk to me. And then we went forward. So yeah, it was, but if that friend hadn't said, get your backbone in and make that call, I maybe wouldn't have done that.
And we
Hmm.
would still be sitting in the dark with our needlework tools. We wouldn't know anything about them. Yeah, I love that. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, what do you think was the most difficult aspect of putting the book together? Was it the writing? Was it the photography, the design, like what do you think was the hardest thing?
Controlling the scope was super.
Because you wanted to go bananas?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And in some cases, deciding what should be in there. Like one thing I got feedback on from a particular person was there's not enough concrete years assigned to each object. And I know that some objects don't have a year on them, but I had to either exclude it from the book, or at the time I couldn't find it. And so you have to weigh those decisions as you go. And you also can't underestimate the armchair critics that you're going to run into. And that's okay. I'm much better at that now, much more resilient than when I started. So yeah.
So how many items do you think you left out? Could we have like a whole nother book if you were to take those items you left out?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Oh, there's my Christmas wish.
That's how the sewing roll came to be. That chapter is bigger in the book.
Mhm.
Uh, but again, at the time, I thought maybe there wouldn't be another book. And so I would say even since that book, there could be another book. I mean, yeah.
So just because you touched on that real quick, tell us what exactly made you write the sewing roll book?
Because the first book was all on American pieces. So I only included things that I knew to be American at the time. And I had so many other pieces that I knew were English and French and Irish and Canadian. And that opens up a whole nother box. I also felt more confident publishing. I felt more confident with the photography. I knew more about the backside of selling books and how the industry was changing, because I probably submitted my proposal in 2015 or 2016, and I didn't get the print copy till the fall of 2018.
Mhm.
And I could move much quicker on my own. But that wasn't the main reason. But I was in a whole different place last year.
Tish just asked, when you were going through people's things, did you find anything in a private collection that the owner didn't know its significance, or the opposite, their treasure was not what they thought?
There's a couple things that the owner and we discussed whether we thought it was a reproduction or not, and kind of, how we would decide that, because when you talk with other collectors, we're always wondering, should we get this? Should we not get this? What do we like about it? And so there are things in everyone's collections that they still have questions on. Yeah. So that was part of the fun, was having this mutual love of these needlework tools, and then sitting down with someone in their collection and just getting all excited about, looking at them together and talking about the specifics. And I'm taking a lot of notes too, because when I go back, I'll also be writing descriptions and, any information that they think is pertinent. But there was nothing that I would say was controversial or like would be upsetting to somebody, or, yeah, I can't think. Oh, well, there was one thing, and I won't say where it was. I won't give any details, but one box had a bottle of ink in it, and I'm like, probably this shouldn't be here. And that's the only thing that I think that comes to mind. And they didn't realize it had been put in there that way.
So the advice was taken well.
Yeah.
Well, I'd say that sounds pretty lucky that all that stuff you looked at, and not once did you ever have to give bad news. But on the flip side, it is always exciting to find that nut in the rough, like something really amazing that you weren't expecting.
Yeah.
But there are so many collections you have yet to see, I'm sure. There are places still to look at things.
I almost feel like needlework tools are a little bit different, say, than like the textiles, or at least quilts, because I feel like there's a lot of reproduction quilts out there that it's real easy for people to get confused about. But I feel like with needlework tools, the ones that are really nice, they're old. The ones that are reproductions or newer, just, the specific I will give is the sewing bird. I have a reproduction sewing bird, and it is like stamped brass. It is not like the big heavy thing that I know that you and Jill both have in your collection. These, nice cast iron things. And it's like, nobody could ever confuse that sewing bird that I have as something that's old. So I don't know, I realize that there are things that might be, a little bit confusing as to how old or new they are. Cat. But I feel like when you find something, and you know what it is, there's probably less of a margin of error. I don't know. I'm kind of jabbering here, but
I think that happens more often, like at a guild event or something. I was in Kansas last month or 2 months ago. I can't even remember when that was. And people are almost cautious, like they bring things to show, and they're like almost scared, and I'm like, just bring it, we love it anyway, it's fine. And someone had brought a sewing bird that was from like the 1920. Well, it's over 100 years old, right? It's not the 1853 Waterman, but it's still very cool. And so we talked about the differences, and I think she felt a little validated because it was a really cool bird. Was it the original? No, but it's still an antique and it's still cool. And I told her I would be happy to have it in my collection. So be proud of it.
that's awesome. And I have to say, if I may, your book really did that for me in a lot of cases, where I was like, oh, all I have is the stuff that's, not that old or not, that interesting. And then I looked at your book and I'm like, wait a minute, I actually have some stuff that's noteworthy. You know, it's worth collecting, even though it may not have cost a lot of money, or, you know, it has that history. So I was like,
You can build a fascinating collection of paper needlebook covers,
mm-hmm.
you know, and they're like $10 each. I mean, sure, you can spend more, but you can get a ton of history off of, you know, a handful of those.
I even
Yeah.
feel like sometimes those should be a bigger deal than they are, because not only is it just like the needles part, it's ephemera, and ephemera doesn't survive very well, especially if it's something that's used and opened and things, like they become destroyed. They're not made of bone and metal. So
Yeah,
then,
and
like,
there's the whole cross-collectible nature of them. You can get into the history of lithography and when were we printing in more than 6 colors, and what about this foil paper? And yeah, there's a whole second audience for that besides needleworkers.
I almost kind of feel like they're I had made a note as I was reading, because I do that. And I don't remember which chapters or which pages we were on, but I was like, wow, there should really be a book that's just about sewing advertisements, because I never noticed them, the little card advertisements, until you were like, look at this. And I'm like, what is that? Oh my goodness. And I had bought a stack of them not too long ago, and I was showing them online, and some of them I'm like, these are so interesting, because in a lot of cases they have nothing to do with sewing. They're like, here are kids skating out on ice. By the way, here's some Clark's spool thread. So I'm like, that would be very interesting to
Well, like
have
the
all that in one place.
Benna West needlebook, and then just reading about, oh, Benna West, women couldn't even buy insurance until she got into it. And so there's the whole backstory associated with all of those. So definitely those backstories I find so fascinating.
Yes, I wouldn't have even thought about that without it. Stephanie, your hair is moving. I wouldn't have thought of any of that without reading that. And that's one of the things that I love about stuff like this, is that secondary history that comes out of looking at something that you didn't think was significant in that manner, and then you find out it's extremely significant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that actually kind of jogged my mind a little bit, when we asked you earlier, where could you possibly look for these things? What are some, untapped markets, I guess. And that reminded me, I have something that it was a Pillsbury flower premium thing in the original box, and I think it was meant to be a pincushion, but it was not listed as a sewing item. And it was simply in the, like, Pillsbury collectors, like whatever, and I think with like Pillsbury Doughboys and stuff like that. And I knew right away what it was. I was like, oh, that's a pincushion. I'm gonna get me that. And I now have seen it without the box, costing very much more than I paid for it in antique stores. So I think that's probably, like, if you're looking for something that maybe, say, advertising ephemera, look there, and you might find the needlework tools that it doesn't occur to them to cross promote.
Mm. Totally.
Yeah.
So
So, oh, go ahead. Is it your
are
turn?
who knows? I was gonna say, Dawn, tell us what your favorite thing about sewing tools is. And it can be many things.
Yeah. I think that they were practical, yet they could be beautiful. And being a hand worker, I know the importance of how things feel in your hand. So there's that. Although some aren't very ergonomic or very comfortable, that's kind of a funny part of them. Uh, the backstories, I think the backstories are really fun to research. Um, the variety, all the different materials, from hard to soft to, everything in between. Um, yeah, it's the history.
Would you say that you have, because we were talking earlier on about, people that focus their collection on one type of thing. Do you have a favorite kind of tool to collect?
I do not. And early in my collecting, someone asked me the same question that I asked Jill, is what was your focus going to be? And maybe they meant what I meant. What I meant for her is it more in the nature of what could I help you find, or what could I tell you about that would help you, get started. But I think for me, they were saying, you can't have all the things. So what's the thing that you want? Well, I don't have that. When I look at something, I often think, do I love it? Is it something I could use in a magazine article? Is it something I would like to recreate? Does it look like good potential to research? So, I mean, I kind of have a few little mental questions in my head that I might ask myself if I'm on the fence, trying to decide. Or if I'm in the middle of a project and I need something and I'm out actively looking for, oh, I need 2 more military examples or something that could be useful. Yeah, so never know.
It's funny if someone had said to me like, well, you can't have all the things, I'd be like, well, I don't need your negativity in my life because I can certainly
Exactly.
try.
I did feel a little bit like that in that discussion. And that was also a discussion too, that they were concerned, which is great because they cared. They were concerned that I wasn't buying things in perfect condition. And that wasn't probably even in my top, 6 priority things. So, and I'm still fine with that.
Mhm.
I have very few regrets of things that I have buyer's remorse on.
I feel like I hear that a lot when we're talking about buying antique quilts, is always like buy the best that you can afford, but that's a very relative term. Um,
It is, and I even with quilts, I feel like there's things that are historically significant. Mary Witherwax behind me. I have 2 or 3 friends that would never even consider having it in their collection because she's not perfect. But I feel like she's unique enough and had a ton of history, and kind of quirky. It ticked all the boxes for me, so it didn't bother me that some of the reds were lost. And I don't
Absolutely.
think she's that bad.
And I think that I can't speak for Jill, but I think that's why I connect with your work so much, is because, you do focus on some very cool things, very nice things, but it's also like the story and the intrigue and the uniqueness. And that's always like my number one, those are my number 3, my number 1 through 3, is just finding things that are interesting and have a great story versus, the finest thing that has never been used.
Yeah, and I know a lot of collectors, and that's, I respect them and everything, but when money is no object, it loses part of the story for me. Like, I don't know, it's almost like you don't have to work to find the object. Like if you can just go and, you started your quilt collection 3 years ago and you've got 100 stunning top of the line quilts. That's not the same story, I don't think, as having quilts that like speak to you.
Because you've got to make hard choices.
Yeah, that, and I think you have to be maybe a little more discerning on what you're going to do with them and how you're going to use them, maybe. And maybe you've done a lot more research because the decision to purchase is more meaningful to you.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And the joy of the hunt. I mean, that's like really how you started this whole discussion is, I mean, sometimes it's literally just going out there, literally getting your hands dirty at some of those places.
Literally.
Yeah, and I know collectors that are like, ew, you went in a barn, I would never, buy, and did you wash that? And there's a place for everybody in the whole spectrum of collecting. I just like things that more people can identify with and are more, I don't know, user friendly or owner friendly. Like I do have some pieces that I call responsibility pieces, and I'm almost stressful to own. And honestly,
they're so fragile or so like compromised.
Well,
Yeah.
it's more so the expense and the rarity. And those, I don't know, sometimes I think those might be the ones I get rid of first, just because it's kind of stressful to have them.
Robin had commented that perfection can be overrated,
I
and
agree.
yeah, that's absolutely true. And again, like there's such a story behind the wearing of things, because if they're not worn, they're not used most likely. And you get into that whole, how was this used and who was this used by? If it's a quilt that was just made and put in a trunk, there's less questions to ask.
Mm-hmm.
Because you basically stop at like, well, who made this, why, and when did it go in this trunk? And then, the story might end there. But I mean, it's not to say that those really, really nice pieces aren't worth collecting. It's just, I
I
feel
feel like
like,
it's limiting. It's
yeah,
limiting.
well, and Steph, you'd mentioned before, like kind of feeling the worthiness of your items, where why wouldn't they be worthy? It's not only the really expensive stuff that's quote worthy. Janet just asked, do you have specialized insurance on items that are valued by you?
I do. I carry a couple different policies. When I was first starting out and I realized, I had a few things, mainly the quilts, I was getting some appraisals, but then I had an insurance incident that really educated me on insurance. And at that point, I changed my insurance and stopped getting appraisals. And I carry a collector's insurance policy. Um, and you can have those written different ways. You can have them for a business, you can have them for a private collection, you can have combinations. I have a special rider on my household insurance, which will vary by your state and your insurance company. And like I said, I had an insurance incident and it really educated me on insurance, and settling that whole debacle. So yes, it's important to understand insurance.
It's
And you
interesting. I
think
didn't
it's
know that there was
worthwhile?
collector specific. Yeah, is it?
Well, I haven't had a claim on the collectibles policy, fortunately, which is a good thing. The claim I had is we frequently did corporate relocations of our work, and we had an entire moving van stolen. And it
Oh.
included, of course, everything I had collected at the time. Um, and so that settlement process took like 9 months or so. Um, and so I learned a lot through that process and did a lot. After that, then we did a lot more uh, inventorying what we had. I mean, right down to the kitchen cabinets, let alone just the collectibles, because you'd be surprised how fast things add up. And then just, being in the quilt and needlework embroidery world, hearing people talk about appraisals, and, my opinion is you should talk to your insurance very specifically before you worry about appraisals. Um,
Mhm.
um, an appraiser shouldn't give you insurance advice.
Mhm. Yeah.
Sounds like good advice.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Well, I guess our last question to wrap up this interrogation of Dawn. Um, do you have any favorite stories to share just about, I don't know, acquisition of something, finding something, letting something go?
Um, Gosh, there's so many stories. I mean, that's part of what I like about it is the hunt, going out and finding things. Um, well, probably it's most fun when you're with other people because you kind of share that joy of like, oh my God, look what I just found, or get away from this case, I have dibs, kind of that fun kind of dancing around. Um, and it's fun when everybody makes a haul. And some of my friends, when we travel, we shop and do our symposium or whatever we're doing all day, go back to our hotel room, after dinner, and then we call it like museum night, and we lay all of our goods out on the beds, and then we go room to room and re-examine, everybody's things. Those are really fun evenings to do. Um, yeah, I'm sure people who've had to clean our hotel rooms, I try and be really tidy, but sometimes you have to unframe things or take something semi disassemble it or whatever. We always try and be really courteous. Like, I just broke a 16 by 20 piece of glass in my room. um, but yeah, there's always a story. Every trip has a story or two, right?
Leslie just said, thanks, Dawn. The process of putting the book together was so interesting. I ordered your book yesterday and will use it for some research I'm doing. Can't wait to get it. And Arlene said, would love some good insurance information to look into or consider. Appraisal policies definitely differ. She said, I'm an appraiser and I totally agree with you.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know there's some appraisers that would probably like to shoot daggers in me, but sometimes you really need that written appraisal and other times you don't, and you need to get that information from an insurance broker or an insurance agent. And I always suggest that you start with a broker in your state, even sometimes in your county, and you have to be really specific because a lot of them don't understand anything other than your furniture and your car. I mean, they don't understand the nature of the price of a quilt or a price of a sewing box or the extent of a collection. So, yeah.
Well, speaking of that, can you just tell us quickly about your process there with Mary Witherwax behind you, since Steph has mentioned potentially wanting to do a sew-along kind of situation with your book, which Arlene, I'm pretty sure you're the one that won that. What can you tell us about that process?
I bought the quilt with the intention of recreating it. So that was always the plan with that. And when it came, I was so excited. I say we because my daughter does a lot of the drawing and stuff for me. She's a wizard at that. Um, and we did it as a digital file first. And so it is available digital. And some of the people that bought the digital file printed at home and they printed it at 200%. So they did more like 8-inch blocks. Then, which is the cool thing about the digital files. I have one of my quilts, I actually printed the block at 50%, and what was, 12-inch block, I made 4-inch. But anyway, I'm sidetracking. So anyway, then we had the digital file, and then we were toying around with self-publishing. And so rather than start right out with a big investment in a full color book, we did a quilt book. And so Mary Witherwax is actually book 2. And we do have a gallery of color pages behind the pattern pages. And we did a print version in book form and we spiral bound it. And so that helped us wet our feet. We connected with a great local printer. He's a union shop. He pays union wages. Everything's done locally right here in Minneapolis. All the things we wanted to do, and did that book for Mary. And then I finished mine. Yes, I did all the grapes. And I should know how many there are. I think there's 600 or 800 grapes, but
oh my goodness.
But you just do 10 a day, 15 a day, and then count till you're done. So that was our process. So digital first, then we put it in book form. And I think I know of maybe 30 that are totally finished, but not the same. So for example, one woman did a black border, which sounds weird, but if you saw it, it's exquisite. One person did a medallion in the center and didn't do all the blocks. A couple people enlarged them. Oh, one person did them all in red work embroidery. So she just traced the outline and did it all in red work. That's stunning. So people kind of applied their own interest to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Yeah,
and some apologize, and I'm like, totally, do make it your own. I'm very cool with that.
Mm-hmm.
that's what I loved when I really looked at it. I was like, I think this is the kind of thing that this quilt lends itself to that. You know, you could do this so many different ways. You can enlarge it. You know, well, obviously I wouldn't make it much smaller. These 3.5, they're 3.5 inch blocks, aren't they? Or three, I mean, they're
Well,
small. They're
Mary was a doodler. When you start looking at each blocks and the size, she
Mhm.
loved to draw and doodle. She loved circles. She loved her cat. She loved drawing. Yeah, and I think she would love seeing how creative people were making it.
Yeah, for sure. And the pictures, I have to say, I think some of them are on your Etsy listing, but there's some in the book where I'm like, that was pretty brilliant what they did there. So I'm very excited to get started. And just for anybody that doesn't already know, Dawn, number one, has a Facebook group for Mary Witherwax, and I want to start doing my sew along. It's a 100-day project, June 1st ish. So I'll post all about that, and I've already been in there, kind of dipped my toe in and seen what some of the other folks have done, and they were very generous and volunteered to show us stuff, and so it'll be fun. So much fun.
Well, that, and it's probably important to say that's not the only Facebook group that Dawn has. She also has a Facebook
Yes.
group that's just about needlework tools.
Yeah.
That is where I found her and informed her that I was moving into her life.
I never
Um,
asked you that, how you found me. So that's interesting.
Say that again.
I never knew where you found me. Like I just
Yes.
remember getting a message from you, and I always answer my messages. And yeah, so it's
Do
good
you
to know.
happen to remember what that message was? Because I was asked that question today. Um,
The way I remember it was something like I'd kind of like to get into this, and I'm not sure like how would I start, or would you have time to kind of tell me how you did it or something like that.
yeah, I think it
And
was
then
something
I
like, could you be a nerd with me?
probably yeah, that's probably why I asked you, like, well, what do you want to focus on? Because, that might have been how that conversation went.
Oh, probably. Yeah. And then I was probably like, I can't. I need to have everything. I think what I thought the story was from my perspective is I had bought something. I think I might have showed you something. Um, and I then searched the first place I always go when I have an interest in something is I see if there's a Facebook group about it. And there are some other tool groups that are not super active. Dawn's was the only one I found that was actually really active. And went in there and kind of said like this is who I am and blah and then messaged her as the admin and and then it just blossomed from there. Um and I mean, honestly, I mean, if I'm being totally honest on, like, you really actually bloomed more into a full-on mentor for me in many regards. I can't say enough wonderful things about the things that you've done for me. I don't even actually think you fully realize. I'm not gonna cry. So, but when people are like, how did you end up getting friends with Dawn? I always say, I just informed her that I am moving into her life like a cat and then became a barnacle that can't be removed. And but luckily, like, I take a lot of pictures and we talk about really cool things. So and for anyone that hasn't gone with other, needlework friends to go somewhere and nerd out, like, you have to. Like, there's really the nerding out with your buddies. And Steph and I, for anyone that is going or will be at Penn Dry Goods at the end of the month in Pennsylvania. If you haven't been to that, it's amazing. Dawn is the one who was like, you need to be here. And I went and she was right. It is definitely a place to be. It's lecture series meets antique show. So it's phenomenal. The shopping is very, very fun. As well as all of the really cool people that you meet. We definitely have some comments in here. Arlene says she wants to do Stephanie's sew along. I have to make some small quilt as a surprise, so I think this will be the perfect project. Robin says she likes the idea of doing this quilt as red work. The more I think about it, the more I just might do it. Robin, that sounds like
Yeah.
you really should do that. I actually was, even when I was telling Steph, like, man, I have been trying to get into needle turn applique, and I'm like, I feel like I'm going to start that project and fall off. And then I was like, but red work might feel a little less daunting for me in terms of doing each block. So, and I was even considering, what about like half and half?
I was
I
going to
want to,
suggest that.
yeah, I want to do more handwork. I want to get into more handwork. But it feels overwhelming. I have all the stuff. I've taken some classes. So I was, maybe it's a good, these blocks are so nice and small. I feel like it's a good practice project.
Sometimes small is hard, but there's a few blocks on here that would be excellent beginner blocks, and you could work your way up in difficulty.
Yeah, that was the
Yeah.
other thing. I was like, I don't necessarily have to do all of them, because my thing was, there's no way I'm going to keep up with 100 days at my skill level currently. But I could definitely get my hands dirty and learn some decent technique and things like that.
Yeah,
Because
as I was flipping through, as I said, this is not a teaching project, but as I was flipping through, there are some that I noticed are probably a little bit easier to start with. So I was going to make some suggestions like that,
yeah,
sometimes just to get your feet wet and kind of get in the groove. It is sometimes easier to start with an easy one, or better to start with an easy one, and then you get to the complicated stuff.
well, and then you have a whole friend group to do it with.
When we did our Noah and Matilda quilt along, we did 4 blocks a month, but we did 2 more difficult and 2 easy. So that you could decide, everybody's different where they're at in the not only skill, but just their spare time and their time they want to spend on the project. So we did it that way, kind of identified simpler ones and some more difficult ones.
I think you had just finished Noah and Matilda when I met you. I think I remember you mentioning it. I think.
Yeah, I can't remember, but
yeah. To share my being Dawn's barnacle story. I actually went with my mom to a thing, one of our local quilt shops. The woman was a friend of my mom's, and I've become friends with her. And she, was holding this 2-day event where Dawn and another person were coming. And one day we kind of did a quilt turning with Dawn. And then the other day we went to the Virginia Quilt Museum. This was in Virginia. And, I remember talking to Dawn, my mom talked to her, and, then we went about our business, as you go to these things and they're wonderful. And then fast forward, it was last year, and Jill had been telling me about Dawn, and I had her book and I hadn't put 2 and 2 together yet. And I was like, wait a minute. Okay. And then I was going to meet you at the Penn Dry Goods show. And I started saying to my mom, I was like, I think we know Dawn. And she's like, do we? And I was like, I am positive that she was the historian that came and did, this quilt turning and came with us to the Virginia Quilt Museum with, Kellyanne's little tour. And so then I remember like basically accosting you on the stairwell at Penn Dry Goods and being like, I think I know you. And you're like, what? Who? What? So it was really cool, like realizing like I already knew you, even though, we had only met that one time and had sort of limited interaction, but it was cool.
Well, and little did you know that Dawn still had the photo.
Yes, and that's the other piece of it. Dawn found a photo from it the other day, and I was like, oh my God. No, when I had like short hair and
I only shared it with you. I didn't put it online unless you want me to.
Well, when she showed it to me, Steph, at first, I didn't even recognize you. I just was looking, I'm like, is that Iva?
Yeah, so you recognize my mom.
Oh yeah, because I didn't recognize you with short hair and no glasses. And then I realized like Dawn didn't even say like Steph's in there too. I was like, wow, like little did you know that you had photos of people that you didn't remember, that you knew, but you met, but quarters, so to come maybe.
Yeah. It was so funny. That was totally unexpected. And when Jill said it to me, I was like, oh my gosh, look at my hair. Oh God. At least it's like not very well lit. I think we were in some church basement or something for that quilt turning, and it was like
Now the photos of you are much better lit. So, well, of course, we can't stick to an hour about anything, apparently.
we can't.
By the way, just to let anybody know that doesn't know, Stephanie has put in here links to Dawn's Facebook group for her needlework tools, her Etsy shop, a specific link to her Mary Witherwax book, and her group. So if you want to join any of that stuff, Steph will have more details on that.
Yeah, and you cross stitchers out there, Dawn does that too. She's got these beautiful, beautiful cross stitch pieces that are, I think there's some sewing rolls. That's primarily right. Yeah, beautiful stuff.
And actually,
And
Dawn,
I've seen them in person.
did I see that you just released another pattern for, did I see you do a bodkin?
Oh, the pattern that we did as a kit, I did just as a pattern.
Oh, okay.
I already have the trims and they just want the pattern. And I had waited to do that because I had done that pattern for Piecework magazine. And I had to wait a certain amount of time before I released
Before
my.
you were allowed to pattern it. Ah, yes. I was lucky I have that issue of piecework and I made my own. But yes, those are a fun thing. And you still have the kits, don't you? Yeah, you do. So that's a fun, the bodkin holder is a fun little project.
Yeah, guys, if you haven't been on Dawn's Etsy, she's got all kinds of stuff on there. Like you would be surprised. People think she's just an author. Like, nope, there's stuff on there. She's always coming out with interesting goodies, interesting things. You definitely want to follow her on Instagram and Facebook. She's got stuff going on. It's a busy girl, busy girl. Busier than either of us are, that's for sure.
And we are lucky that she is our friend. She makes
Well,
us
and that
look
we
good.
can make her be busier by hanging out with us. Because sadly, we won't see you at Penn's. So I'm glad we could see you here.
Well, I got quite the calendar this year, which is good, but yeah, next year.
I'm gonna hold you to that.
Yeah, we're
It
gonna
is
miss you.
now in the internet. The internet has heard it. You'll start getting hotel suggestions now for 2025.
Yes. All guilds need to like keep off of that weekend. They can have you any other weekend.
Well, thank you so much
Oh,
for
yes.
coming on and talking to us and spending time with us. And really, like, I have to take this moment just to thank you for being so open and willing to share. I feel like, especially a lot of younger collectors sometimes feel intimidated, by people that have been collecting a long time or they're historians and things, and you are very accessible and generous with your time and your knowledge, and we appreciate it so much more than we could say without being weird. Because we could get weird, but
I think we're already effusively weird, but
without making it uncomfortable. So the fact that you just were so generous in doing this with us, like, really, thank you very much.
Well, it was very fun. Thank you so much for having me and going through the book, and it's fun.
Well, and now that we're doing, now that that whole thing has spawned our Needlework Nights every other Wednesday, I have a feeling, you guys, that who knows, we could see Dawn again at some point. Because,
well, I mean, we have an official consultant in our midst, so our Needlework Nights can only be wonderful because we have great things to reference. So
absolutely,
we're highlighting needlework tools because they need their moment in the sun.
and that moment can't ever end. There's too much to talk about. Just there's too much to look at. And just to remind everybody else, tomorrow we get back into our regular schedule for our Book Talk Tuesday, where we're starting our new legacy book. Remember, that's at 8 p.m. Eastern. And then our next Needlework Nights is on the 22nd, and we're doing embroidery scissors. So if there is something that you want to share, you can either message us on Instagram or Facebook, or you can email us photos and things to quiltnerding@gmail.com. Do you have any other things to say, Steph?
just, I mean, I live in the dream right here. You know, getting to nerd out on all this stuff is just fabulous. And I am so appreciative of people like Dawn that are so generous with their time and you know, put up with our hijinks and our shenanigans.
It makes it too fun to like not want to be around. I think that's going to do it for us tonight, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us and talking. Everyone's in the chat here saying thank you, Dawn, so much for your time. Robin did say she ordered the pattern book. Thank you so much, Dawn. It's been a pleasurable experience learning about tools. Yes, Arlene, tomorrow is 8 p.m. Eastern, not 7. Always 8 on the Tuesdays, but who knows? We could end up moving that at some point. We can't stop talking about things. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Have a great
Bye,
night.
guys.